So right off the bat, I'm thinking about the types of things that at least I was thinking about that I felt could have been an influence to this book, and The Ring was a big one, right? Because like once you see it, you're gonna die, kind of thing.
Yeah, yeah, and that was you were talking about the being seen.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah. I was
yeah,
trying to leave
this
that in a way that it wasn't
right,
gonna
yeah.
mess up the story.
So Lady Midday, right? Like if you the whole thing was is that if you saw this movie, she could kind of reach out to you, sort of. And that's was one of the creepiest things was the conversation that she has with Lois, where she talks about you have been seen.
Yeah, this is where the story got really fucking cool because so essentially, if you're looking at it, Iris, what we discover toward the end of the book, but this is kind of how it lays out. Iris, um, Iris and her husband had gone to Europe to where she was born because she was obsessed with this fairy tale fable thing, and her husband thought that this would kind of put that to rest so that she could just live a normal life.
Well, they went back because that's where her father, like that whole thing in the field.
Yeah,
Father like took the whole family out in the field and made them like
and
live out there, and
for
that's
yeah
where her
for like a
father
couple
was
weeks.
killed by Lady Midday.
Right, so she was haunted by her. Yeah,
Yeah.
her father doing that fucked up thing, but then who he was killed by, Lady Midday, right?
Yes, he's his head was found like buried 2 feet under the ground or something.
Right.
Yeah,
So then, but homeboy husband thinks I'm gonna take her back there so she can kind of put this all behind her. Right? Am I right about that at least?
that is correct. Yeah.
But the problem is, then the village is like, oh no, you got to go talk to Midday, and they take her out, and it's all women. There's a really interesting women thing in this book because basically everything powerful that happens in this book is female.
I don't know if I agree with that because we have and I don't have the doc open, of course. With Vasek,
Okay,
he's really the catalyst for everything that happens because he's you know.
but he's more of a tool
Well,
because
that's true, I guess. Yeah.
so he doesn't. He's not inherently powerful. He is almost like a medium through which something is an effect can be made. But we'll get. I'm sure we'll get to that. But so but then so getting to her hometown and seeing Midday is where shit goes wrong because then that's when Midday Iris looks at Midday and then she's kind of stuck with her for the rest of her life, right?
Yeah, basically. And then so really it's funny because Iris is a very she's drawn to be a very sympathetic character, right? So as you're learning
Absolutely.
about her, you feel bad for her. She's got the lost son, she's trying to do all these things. And really she's the one who fucks up. Because
Yeah.
capturing her on film is what lets her like, you know what I mean, like continue on in way into the future when this film is discovered again.
Well, but that's the interesting thing. So Iris, when she gets back to the United States and they lose their son, years and years, a few years later, that they get back to the United States. She gives birth to Hyatt. Hyatt's autistic, and eventually, what 8 years down the road or whatever, vanishes.
Yeah, about that.
And then that's when Iris goes nuts. The husband leaves for Europe, and then he sends her the camera, and that's when she starts making films. And when she makes the films, the idea is she's going to use this weird blind guy, who's Vasek or whatever his name is, right?
Hmm.
To try and pull her memory of Midday out of her mind and put it on film so that it's gone from her mind. Right?
Yes. Now, the one of the, and I had just a couple of issues with, and again, you're reading a fucking ghost story, so you can't suspend disbelief, right? There's a different issue. But fucking Vasek Sidlow is the worst fucking superhero ever, right? So he's got this power, but how do you figure out you have this power? Right. So let's talk about people who find out they have powers,
Well,
and
he
it doesn't matter what medium. You fall off a building and find out you can fly because your body immediately saves you, right? But he's like, if you're thinking of something and I'm touching you and I'm touching some film, what you're thinking about goes into the film. Like, and now let's remember, this is at the birth of film too. So it's not like this isn't like holy shit. If I'm touching your iPhone, all of a sudden, you know what I mean? Like the shit happens. I start seeing the things you're thinking, and they show up on a screen on your phone or something. This is a pretty, very, very, very specific talent that he has. That might be a little questionable on how
yeah.
a
Well,
he figured out he had it, and how you find that guy if you're Whitcomb.
But he did hang out with all those weird occult people. Like
Yeah, which is
that's how
something
he
we
was
didn't talk
introduced
about
to
in the main
Iris.
review, which was there was some interesting stuff there too.
But so the great what I think is one of the greatest parts of this whole book though is had Iris not decided to watch the film, she would have been free.
Yeah, that's probably true.
It's like it's fucking straight up said in the book. Had she not looked at it, she probably would have had a happy life or something like that. And I'm like, man, that's badass. Because then she did look at the film, and that's when shit went wrong, and that kind of previewed what could happen later on with this new film that they were trying to make, right?
Sorry, I had you muted. Yes, and I'm actually going to read one of the quotes I had because this is probably my favorite line in the whole book. And this is Safi talking. So I'm going to start off with her actual dialogue. You thought you could trap a god in a freaking roll of film? Safi repeated, understandably stuck on that particular part of the equation. Like, that's the best line in this whole book because someone finally goes, what the fuck were you thinking? So,
Yeah, and all right, so and then the other twist that I thought was really great was essentially up until the very end, up until Lois had made the same mistake essentially that Iris had, right? By trying to make a film of Lady Midday.
yep.
She had never been in contact with Lady Midday. It was always the ghost of Iris.
Hmm.
That was a creepy fucking reveal.
Right. And the ghost of Iris was trying to stop her. And you know she's trying to stop her because
Because she's
Iris
like,
is
yeah.
pleading with her to stop this shit.
She's like, don't go, calling
yeah,
her sister.
right. And you figure out that the bad shit that's been happening, Iris has been doing to keep her from basically unleashing Lady Midday on the world, which is
Right.
what happens at the end. Is she basically, Robin said, inspired by the ring, and since we're heavy into spoiler talk, she comes out of the screen, but that's fucking terrifying because she's like 12 feet tall and dragging a fucking sword on the ground. And I will say that was some solid shit right there.
Yeah,
Like it's so much worse than what Lois expected.
I know. That was great. But yeah, it was very much like the like I watched The Ring not long after it came out, and it was the American version, not the original Ringu or whatever. But that fucking creeped me out too. Like I couldn't go to sleep after watching that movie. Like the idea that once you see this thing, like in The Ring, obviously you die after 7 days or whatever. But with this, once you see this thing, essentially your life will forever be tied to this thing, and it's like this torturous kind of existence.
I only held off on this last quote because it's at the very end of the book, and maybe it's not really spoilery, but I'm going to go ahead and roll it here because I really like this a lot. And this goes back to what I said during the review about how insightful some of the stuff is that isn't necessarily related to the ghost story. For a thought cannot be unthought any more than the world can be unmade, and thus we can never escape the consequences of our mistakes, not without great price and cost and pain, or perhaps not even then.
That's pretty good.
Yeah. So there's so much good shit in this book. One more plot device that I want to mention is we see this as a memoir and we get past it, right? And then Lois is saying, so we wrote this great best-selling book, and the book is about how fucking Rob did all this shit.
Yeah.
And how none of it is actually the story that she's now telling you, that she's writing down, because she mentions at some point Simon's going to read this.
Yep.
So,
Okay,
so
you picked
she
up on that
spins-
too because
Yeah.
okay.
She spins this whole tale of this book that they wrote. So the whole time you're reading it, right, you're thinking like she's writing this, and this is the book that you bought to read, right? Like
Yep.
this is the interview with the vampire. This is the dialogue
Right.
I had with this person. And really what she's writing is a personal memoir that is probably not going to be released so much as kind of a way for her to get it all out.
Almost
The
like a
book she
confession,
actually
yeah.
writes, yeah, the book she actually writes pins everything on fucking Rob, who dies, during the final big scene. And everything. So he was basically his whole involvement in this was, I think, kind of a plot device to pin it all on him. So she writes a great book, but it has nothing to do with Lady Midday. Lady Midday isn't even mentioned. It's all about how he's trying to steal this idea that she had about Whitcomb being the first filmmaker and the sabotage that he did. And basically everything gets blamed on him at the end. And he's dead, so who gives a shit?
which is beautiful because like the entire conflict or how the whole story with Rob was that um she watched his video, which put her on the scent of the story, which inevitably became her project, but he was always trying to steal credit for it, or derail her, or kind of get involved with it because he wanted to be the one that broke this big story, and she fought him somewhat successfully throughout, and at the end, yeah, it's great that it got turned around and he ended up being the scapegoat for all the bad shit that happened. And in the end, getting credit was really kind of the worst thing that could have happened to him. I thought that was a really good comeuppance. That and the fact that he got his head cut off was pretty cool.
Yeah, all of it. This is what we have here in Gemma is I think pretty masterful storyteller. When you take it all in, like while I was reading, I was like, this is good, this is good, this is good. But when I step back and look at big picture, and I mentioned this in our actual review, like this is a lot more intricate
Yeah.
than it comes across even when you're reading it, because after it's all done, you step back, there's all these things, right? There's the whole kind of switch where you're not dealing with Lady Midday the whole time, you're really only dealing with Iris. There's that whole like fiction that's written about Rob being the guy who made all these bad things happen, and it's how they can explain away how they weren't involved really, in the whole thing. That was this guy's doing. So everything that was done that is inexplicable is now explained away by Rob. There's so much good stuff in this book.
Yeah, but at the same time, so one thing I don't like is when, and I can't think of a great example off the top of my head, but you get a story that gets so mired down in the details of like the shit that it's like not the main story. Like this gives you enough of the lore to understand what's going on with this fucking ancient god thing, and it gives you enough of film history, enough backstory of the characters, but nothing is too much. Everything is just the right amount of whatever it needed to be.
Yeah, it's got good balance. I agree.
Lots of creepy too.
Lots of creepy.